Most Christians believe helping people is always the right thing to do, because kindness feels like the purest proof of faith and love. But there are moments in life when the very help you keep giving slowly begins to steal the peace God placed inside your heart. You give your time, your patience, and your energy again and again, because you truly believe loving people is what God expects from you. Yet deep inside your heart, a quiet question keeps appearing every time another disappointment happens. What if the person you keep helping is not someone God sent you to rescue, but someone God has been warning you about? What if your kindness has quietly become the reason certain people continue to stay in your life longer than they were ever meant to? Many believers struggle with this truth because the Christian heart naturally wants to save everyone and fix every broken situation. But the Bible quietly reveals something many people overlook when they talk about compassion and generosity. Even Jesus, who loved people more deeply than anyone in history, did not give his time and energy to every person who demanded something from him. He helped the humble and the sincere, but he also walked away from people who refused truth and never intended to change. True faith is not only about having a loving heart, because real wisdom also means recognizing when your kindness is being misused. And sometimes, the most faithful decision you can make is understanding when God is quietly telling you to step back. One man learned this lesson in a quiet and painful way after years of helping people who never seemed to change. He believed being a good Christian meant never saying no, no matter how many times his kindness was taken for granted. But one quiet night, he finally sat alone in his small room feeling emotionally exhausted from trying to rescue people who never wanted to change. In that silence, he whispered a prayer that many believers eventually whisper after their kindness has been stretched too far. God, am I helping the people you want me to help? Or am I holding on to people you have been trying to remove from my life? That quiet question would slowly open his eyes to something many believers do not realize until much later. Because sometimes God does not only send blessings into your life, but also sends warnings through the people around you. And if you pay close attention, you may start recognizing certain types of people God gently tells his children to stop rescuing. The first type of person God may quietly warn you about is the one who constantly asks for help, but never truly wants to change their life. At the beginning, you believe your support will inspire them to grow, so you continue giving your time, your patience, and your encouragement. You listen carefully to their struggles and offer advice with genuine compassion, because you believe every person deserves another chance. In your heart, you hope that one day, something you say will finally help them move toward a better path. But over time you start noticing that the conversations rarely change, and the same problems continue to appear again and again. The same promises are spoken, the same apologies are made, and yet the same choices keep repeating. At first, you remind yourself that real change takes time, and that patience is part of living a Christ-centered life. You tell yourself that maybe they are simply struggling and need someone strong enough to stay beside them. Yet deep inside your spirit, a quiet feeling begins to grow every time the cycle repeats. Something inside you starts asking whether your help is truly helping or whether it has become the reason nothing ever changes. Because sometimes people do not want guidance and they do not want accountability. What they really want is someone who will continue rescuing them from the consequences of their own decisions. Without realizing it, your kindness slowly becomes a safety net that protects them from learning the lessons life is trying to teach them. And the more you rescue them, the less reason they have to ever take responsibility for their own actions. This is one of the hardest moments for a compassionate believer, because stepping back can feel like abandoning someone who needs help. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow someone to face the consequences that may finally lead them toward change. The second type of person God may quietly warn you about is the one who only appears in your life when they need something. Their messages come suddenly, their calls feel urgent, and their problems always seem to require your time and attention. At first, you do not question it, because helping people in difficult moments feels like the right thing to do. You respond quickly, offer your support, and try your best to be there whenever they reach out. But slowly, you begin to notice something that feels strangely one-sided. They appear only during their storms, yet they disappear the moment the sky becomes clear again. When you go through your own difficult moments, their silence suddenly becomes very loud. The person who once needed you so often is nowhere to be found when you need encouragement. This realization can feel painful because you begin to understand that the relationship was never truly built on mutual care. It was built on access to your kindness. The Bible gently reminds believers to love others, but it never asks you to become a constant source of energy for people who only show up when they need something. Real relationships grow through shared care, not one-sided dependence. Sometimes, God allows you to see these patterns not to make your heart harder, but to make your wisdom stronger. Because when you learn to recognize one-sided relationships, you also learn to protect the peace God placed inside your life. The third type of person God may quietly warn you about is the one who constantly fills every conversation with negativity and emotional heaviness. No matter how much hope you try to share with them, their words always seem to return to complaints, blame, and discouragement about everything around them. At first, you try to be patient, because you believe people sometimes just need someone to listen during difficult seasons of life. You remind them that faith often grows strongest during the hardest moments, and that better days can still come. You offer encouragement again and again, because you truly want them to see the light that still exists in their life. In your heart, you believe that if you stay supportive long enough, their perspective will slowly begin to change. But after many conversations, something begins to feel different inside your spirit. You start noticing that every interaction leaves you feeling more drained than encouraged. Instead of lifting each other up, the weight of their constant negativity slowly pulls at your own heart and peace. The Bible often reminds believers to guard their hearts, because what surrounds us eventually shapes what lives inside us. When someone constantly fills your mind with discouragement, anger, or bitterness, that influence quietly starts to take root. A compassionate heart wants to carry everyone's burdens, but God sometimes protects your spirit by showing you when to step back. The fourth type of person God may quietly warn you about is the one who constantly demands your attention and energy without ever giving anything in return. Every call, every message, and every favor seems urgent, but when the roles are reversed, they are nowhere to be found. At first, you convince yourself that helping them is simply part of being a loving, faithful Christian. You start noticing that their presence in your life is only felt when they need something, and every interaction begins to feel like a one-way street. They rarely check in on your well-being, and they often forget the times you've already supported them in meaningful ways. At some point, your heart begins to quietly ask if this is the relationship God wants you to continue investing in. The fifth type of person God may warn you about is someone who manipulates your faith for their own benefit. They twist your words, use your kindness, or guilt you into giving more than you can reasonably provide. You feel compelled to help because you think it's the right Christian thing to do. But slowly, their actions start to weigh on your spirit more than they lift it. Sometimes, these people are so subtle that you don't notice their influence at first. They rely on your heart and patience, slowly draining your energy until helping them becomes more about obligation than love. God allows you to feel this burden as a gentle warning that your faith and peace should never be exploited. The sixth type of person God may warn you about is someone who refuses to learn from past mistakes. They continue to repeat harmful behavior, ignore wise advice, and remain resistant to any effort at personal growth. Your repeated help and guidance might feel ignored, and this pattern can quietly begin to drain your emotional and spiritual strength Even when you try to set boundaries, they find ways to test them, intentionally or unintentionally. You begin to notice that no matter how much you give, their actions never change. God sometimes allows this realization so that you can understand the importance of protecting your own heart while still showing compassion. Finally, the seventh type of person God may warn you about is someone whose presence consistently pulls you away from prayer, reflection, and spiritual peace. Their demands, negativity, or constant crises slowly crowd out the quiet moments God intended for your soul. You may feel guilty for stepping back, but God's wisdom gently reminds you that loving Him includes protecting your spiritual space. When you finally recognize these patterns, you begin to understand that faith is not only about helping others, but also about knowing when to protect your own heart. God allows these lessons to shape you into someone who can love wisely, not just blindly. The eighth and final type of person God may quietly warn you about is someone who consistently refuses to respect the boundaries God places in your life. They may take advantage of your time, your generosity, and your patience, ignoring every gentle limit you try to set. Even when you kindly say no, they find ways to push past your boundaries, leaving you feeling drained and spiritually exhausted. At first, you may feel guilty for stepping back, worrying that you're abandoning someone who needs your help. But slowly, God shows you that sometimes love means creating space so that both you and the other person can grow in healthy ways. Your heart is not failing in love. It is learning to love wisely. Sometimes the most faithful decision is to stop rescuing someone who refuses to change, who takes your generosity for granted, or who thrives in their own chaos. This does not make you unkind. It makes you discerning, protecting the peace God placed inside your soul. God allows these warnings so you can redirect your energy to relationships that uplift, encourage, and grow both your faith and theirs. He wants you to be strong, compassionate, and wise in how you give your heart to others. Your love is most powerful when it is balanced with boundaries. You begin to realize that some people are in your life for lessons, some for blessings, and some for warnings. Recognizing the difference does not mean you stop loving them. It means you love them wisely. By stepping back, you allow God's plan to unfold in ways that you cannot always see. Your kindness should never be a trap, and your heart should never be a playground for those who refuse to grow. God's wisdom teaches that love sometimes means letting go, so that both you and the other person can find freedom, peace, and growth in Him. So today, listen carefully to the quiet warnings God has been sending. Look around your life and notice the people who drain your spirit. Take your kindness for granted, or refuse to change despite your love. Step back, pray for them, and trust God to work in ways you cannot control. Protect your heart, honor your faith, and let His wisdom guide every act of love you give.